Hello! We are the large and unnecessary first player token, and this is episode 29. I was told to do it, and I think I did a much better job than Chris usually does.
You brought a lot more mirth to the table.
Yeah, there's a lot more of a nasally tone as well. I don't have that.
No, you never go a bit nasal.
I don't have that Eastern European nasally tone.
There we go again. Yes. Let's just talk about ethnicity here.
Oh, you've got the Scottish.
This
nasal
podcast is mostly
Alright, mate.
gone for a bat.
Hello, this is episode 29 of the Large and Unnecessary First Player Token podcast.
And if you could spare any fags,
I wouldn't mind 20p for a bus.
to
Okay,
Falkirk.
Why is it always 20p for a bus? I mean, buses cost a lot more than that.
Aye, but it would, I suppose it would seem likely that someone gathering 20p's is not far off getting a bus fare.
Not if they're wearing a tracksuit and look like they've been awake for 4 days.
So
You're not going to
that's our
Falkirk, mate.
compulsory intro section.
Yep,
Yeah.
that was the introduction to this gaming podcast.
We have spoken.
So yeah, this is a podcast about gaming. We talk about board games, video games, and sometimes role-playing games, depending on whether we like to let Pawel out of his cage.
That almost never happens.
It does happen, and actually most of the RPG talk has been from me and Euan. Now that I think about it, just chatting about Pathfinder.
We have talked about Pathfinder a fair bit. Now it's a singular RPG, but the volume of content that we have provided.
We're still on vanilla RPGs, Pawel.
I think we could call
We're
it
still being
that,
told
yes.
what to do, basically.
We've not moved on to the Broken Dreams flavours yet.
No, it's fine. It's okay. Everybody has to start somewhere.
True. Okay, so talking about starting, hey, there's a segue.
Oh,
Let's
nice.
go straight into board games.
Yeah.
Talk about board games here. Right. It has been a bit of a hectic time, which is why we promised an episode last week and then we quickly broke that promise.
Yeah, I think people are used to that from us by now.
We've not even
People are
prepared
expecting a
many
massive
excuses. There's no. Is there an excuse?
There is an
There is an
It's not an
excuse.
excuse, it's a reason.
Yeah.
But basically,
No
our
reason.
lives are pretty mental at the moment because we're pretty much getting ready to move house.
Yes.
And it's kind of hit us. We knew it was going to come, but we didn't know exactly when, and now it's kind of hit us. So
A lot of stuff's happened, so
we think the next episode will probably be from our new headquarters.
from the new HQ.
Yeah, so that'll be good.
Unnecessary towers, we'll call that one.
Yeah. But we have managed to squeeze in some board gaming.
Yeah, a little bit.
So what will we talk about first? Let's start with Battle Lore.
Yeah, because I've
You and-
actually played Battle Lore.
Me and you played a game of Battle Lore the other night there. I played it with...
I've enjoyed it. You've had a few games of it now.
I've played 3 games of it now.
I thought you played more than that.
No, I've had it. I've only had it a few months.
Oh, right, yeah.
We've had. I think I got it last Christmas
Yeah.
from my brother. Thanks very much.
See,
Cheers, Chris's brother.
I wanted to play this ever since I saw it. I just can't believe you played it without me.
Oh, the catchphrase.
Hey.
Everybody playing at home, mark your bingo cards.
Oh, we must play that Pavel Bingo. at
Pavel
some
Bingo.
point. Yeah.
Well, Battle Lore. Battle Lore is in the same realm as the Commands and Colours
Yes.
series of games.
Which
Does it precede them?
I see. I'm really unsure of the timeline
Yeah,
of the
I think we
Commands and
discussed
Colours
this
thing.
before.
I get the feeling that the system was created and just games kind of latched onto it, but all these games have all got the game design by Richard Borg written on the front of it. So Richard Borg is really he's the guy that's
father.
kind of made these games.
Yeah.
Other people have kind of adapted them into other games, I think. But he is the father of the Commands and Colours
Like
system.
the ODB, there's no father to his style.
True. But aye, so this is the Fantasy Flight one. Now, if you're not familiar with the Commands and Colours system, it's quite simple. It uses commands and colours.
Yeah.
But it doesn't in Battle War. But we'll get to that. Right. But the basic Commands and Colours system is
I'm
that
not confused at all.
you've got command cards, which you play on your turn to move your armies about on the board, because this is a war game. And you have the colours, which are on dice.
Yeah.
Now, you roll dice, and they've got different coloured symbols on them. And depending on what you roll and what unit you're fighting against, you do damage.
Yeah.
Now, the Battle War system takes that and changes the dice system slightly, so there's no actual colours on them, it's just symbols, but it's the same idea.
Yeah, I mean, really, like, it is just sort of the shapes and colours that have changed. Essentially, it is pretty much the same system in terms of how you're fighting, and different. Whatever the hits will depend on the unit that you're using and the unit you're attacking, and that sort of thing. So it's still roughly the same, but you basically just have 4 dice in this. There's not a lot of the commands and colours.
Well, I've got a complaint about that.
Alright, well,
because,
we'll get to that.
See, Commands and Colours Ancients, the base game comes with 7 dice. When you buy the expansions for it, you get more dice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure with Battle or what the expansions actually add to it in terms of dice, but you only get 4 dice with this game, and there are times in this game when you have to roll a hell of a lot more dice than 4. But however, Fantasy Flight would like to sell you more dice.
Are we talking about DLC now?
Yeah, this is
DLC.
This is getting stuff that you pretty much need to play the game.
Yeah. Well, there's always been a bit of cross-pollination between tabletop and video games and the sort of ripping people off market.
But, right, so the Commands and Colours system, can we name all the Commands and Colours games, do you think?
Well, you've got Ancients and the various expansions
so
of
Ancient
that.
set in the Ancient World, Romans and Greeks and
Well, that's
all
the
that
one
sort
I
of
played,
thing. Yes, you've played that.
Napoleonics.
Napoleonics.
Which, we've not had a chance to play. You do have a copy of that. But.
Yep.
That would be cool.
Yes. There's also a Samurai Battles one.
Yep.
Now, the Samurai Battles one's kind of weird because it actually comes with 2 different systems. So you've got the Commands and Colours system and a new system that they've created for the game as well, and you can play that game with either system.
Yeah.
So I've not got that. I'd like to play it, but it's quite expensive, I think.
Well, I remember one of the things when we were looking at that was quite interesting. Just certainly the Samurai one has really intricate like figurines for it, or there's like you have a base and you can fit 4 soldiers
I'm
into
getting
it.
more
They
and
look
more
really nice.
intrigued.
Yeah. Well, it was a similar to thing, and the other one you've got Memoir 44.
Memoir 44. That's the
Second
one I'm
World War
missing.
themed one, and that again compared to Commands and Colours is basically the Ancients and the Napoleonic ones is just bits of wood with stickers on.
Yeah.
Whereas the Memoir 44, you've got some very nice pieces.
Some
your
nice
tanks
World War II,
and
yeah.
your soldier men.
Soldier
And
men.
that carries on in battle lore. You've got some figurines for
So
that.
battle lore, I take it by looking the box is a fairly fantasy.
Yeah.
It's very fantasy setting, so it's a Fantasy Flight game. They like that kind of thing. So it's a very fantasy setting. It's not got the generic, dwarves and maybe the expansions do, but the base game doesn't have that sort of like orcs and dwarves and elves and stuff like that.
What do you get?
You've got some sort of human type people.
There's always humans.
Okay.
My God.
But it's the evil side, the chaos side, if you will, that's more interesting because they do have sort of little guys that you could maybe call an orc, but they call them other things, and they don't behave like orcs do.
And they're a mix of kind of different lore and ideas that have gone into the sort of character design.
There's only 2 factions because in Commands and Colours there were obviously plenty.
Well, Commands and Colours was more of a scenario-based thing, and you do get more. When you buy the expansions, you get more armies, if you will, but you don't actually need them because you could just use the little box that you get in the base game and just say, okay, these are the Gallic warriors or whatever.
But you're only playing with 2 factions whenever you play the Commands and Colours anyway. So
that's it. It is a one-on-one game.
Yeah. And the entire original, the first Ancients is all Rome and Carthage, is it not?
The base game is it's the Punic Wars basically. Yeah.
Punic.
But the expansions for Commands and Colours Ancient adds in Greeks and like the Gauls and stuff like that. The Gauls are fun.
There's always barbarian folk.
So in here it's only humans against some sort of
Skeletor.
Skeletor.
Evil team.
Yeah.
Now
Goodies and baddies.
It comes with lovely plastic figures.
Yeah,
the miniatures in this are excellent. I'll just give that to Pawel to inspect, but you've got things like a
hear the
Griffin
noises in the
Rider.
background.
There's griffins.
Yeah, there's one.
Yeah.
There's one griffin, and there's also a Chaos Lord, who is a nice other big thing. But you've got there's 5 different types of unit.
Yeah, so you've got
for each side.
Both factions basically they've got a basic infantry and a basic archer unit.
Yeah.
Some kind of bow ranged unit.
They're different for both sides, so they have different special abilities, which is nice.
Yeah, so the thing they've done with Battle Lore is they've reduced the number of types of units, but then they've add more complexity to the individual units. So you'll have cards for units to keep you keep track of what their sort of abilities are, their movement, the number of dice they roll when they attack, and their defense and that sort of thing. But yeah, each one will have some kind of special ability.
Yeah.
That may be triggered depending on what you roll. There's one of the symbols on the dice is like a crown sort of thing that it comes up, and that usually triggers special abilities for most of you.
Yeah, I mean, the crown is essentially useless on its own.
Yeah.
But if the unit that you're using has a crown symbol on its card, you can use that ability, and some of those abilities are pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And it's the scenario system for this is quite interesting as well.
Oh yeah, this is one of the nicest things about this game.
I really like the way this works.
So I'm sorry, this is not a griffin; it's a large pigeon.
Yeah, it's a large. Okay, whatever. You've been pedantic again, man.
It does actually. Now that I look at it, it's certainly got a pigeony look to it, certainly. But that doesn't come across in the figurine.
Yeah,
it seems more menacing than that. Than the way
it's
they've
a
drawn
menacing
it
pigeon
on the back of the box there.
So back to the scenarios.
Yes,
lots less pigeon talk. The scenario, the way this game works. So like in other Commands and Colours games, you basically have like scenario booklets that tell you how to set up both armies and where the terrain is for each battle, and that's generally because they're based on historical battles. And they try and be sort of reasonably accurate in a small space, and they do it quite well. Now in Battle War, what actually happens is at the start of the game, the two different sides will get a bunch of cards, which are scenario cards, and on those cards you've just got a layout of your side of the map and an objective at the bottom of it. So basically you pick one of those, your opponent picks one of those for their side, and then you put them both down and lay out the map as it shows on those two cards. So their opponent puts down their side and you put down your side.
That's pretty cool.
And your objective might be, okay, you might have to hold a certain position, like it's maybe a building or something like that, and if you do that you get points at the start of every round, or the end of every round, sorry. But your opponent's objective might be, they've got to get certain units onto hill spaces or something like that, or
I like that. That sounds cool.
They can spend what they get in this game lore to when you kill units to get points. So it's that kind of thing. So you don't know what you're fighting.
I gotta ask straight away: do you sometimes get some sort of really ridiculous combinations?
I've not seen any ridiculous combinations. I think they've been quite careful about that, so that you don't end up with something stupid.
They're quite subtle. Some of them,
because I think I've played a similar game with two teams getting hold your hill goals and pretty much nothing happened.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We both had that in our game. We basically, I had an objective in there that was I would get a victory point as long as I had one of my particular type of unit on a hill square. It also gave them a bonus that they could do a ranged attack from the hill square because they were like some kind of golem things basically. But I would only get it was like a maximum 1 point, whereas Chris's one, it was combinations of. So if you had two
have a
units,
pair of a hill and a forest.
Yeah, and so there was a potential for him to get more points
so
per round.
You had to.
And there's also, when you set up the two sides of the game board, I think pretty much every scenario has this a side of your board where there will be a certain square that or hex that you can be on, that you will, as long as you've got friendly units on there, you will earn a victory point for that.
Yeah, so there's victory point banners that go on the board.
Okay.
And there's one on each side. So basically, as long as you can get to that, you're also getting a bonus victory point, and that's either side can get that.
Yeah. Nice.
So you tend to find that the fighting is over those spaces because you getting to your objective or whatever is just, it tends to be much easier to do than to then go and fight over these victory point spaces.
Well, but as long as there's reason for people to actually fight, that's cool.
There is,
that's important in a fighting game.
It does push you out, because I mean, you could just sit on top of your objective, but that would just mean whoever the player was that went first would just automatically win the game, really.
Yeah.
But although that does depend on the scenario, because I was getting more victory points than you for my thing, because for every pair that I had, every pair of hill and forest, I was getting a victory point.
Yeah.
You were kind of limited to your two units.
Yeah.
So I could have potentially just got maybe 4 victory points a turn if I'd really pushed out.
If you've gone into sort of my side of the board and things like that and start taking some, so there's a bit of tension, something where you're not quite willing to expend your troops at certain points, but for the most part, there is, because the other thing as well, you've got 18. I mean, certainly the scenario we were playing, it was up to 18. Was it 16?
Every scenario is 16.
16, and that's quite a lot of victory points to be sitting there, not doing anything. You're always there's always going to be some impetus to kind of go at each other. But it also, the other thing with that is that there's no, I mean, if you wipe out the opposing army,
you automatically win.
won. But that's unlikely to happen because you're more likely to go for the sort of objective things. So it creates a scenario feel to it rather than it just being a straight up battle.
All right, another question. In Commands and Colors, the main focus of the tactical system was on actual lines of infantry or other units.
Yes.
And your goal as an enemy, whatever commander, would be to break those lines. And the mechanics were set up around this idea. But in here you have, less units on the actual hexagon map. Which means you don't really have lines as such, which probably means I remember this mechanic where if a unit was surrounded, then they would be wiped out straight away.
That's actually changed in Battle War. That's another thing that they've changed.
I imagine, because there is no lines of...
actually, what would happen in Commands and Colors Ancients is that if you had to retreat, if your unit had to retreat and it would run into other units and it had nowhere else to go, it would start taking losses, even if they're friendly units.
And I remember this was crucial to tactics.
And in Battle Lore, they've changed the retreat system so that when you retreat, you don't actually automatically retreat back towards your side of the board. You retreat in the opposite direction from where you were attacked. Okay. And if you have a friendly unit behind you, you don't suffer losses and you don't retreat. You basically just stay where you are.
All right.
There was one situation you took loss from a retreat. I can't remember when we were playing it. What was that about?
That's because the
edge of the board.
Yeah,
or something?
The way you pushed me off the edge of the board, basically. So I started taking losses because they're basically fleeing.
Because there is some situations where it'll happen, but it's not as integral to the game.
But it has a more of a skirmishy.
It's definitely more skirmishy, and I was actually going to say that. The way that I felt that the game kind of plays is you kind of separate your army up into little groups. Rather than doing the Commands and Colors Ancients thing of, it's really important to have a line.
Those were battles, whereas in here you've got separate warriors and monsters, pretty much just...
So I was kind of even when you were setting up the units, and that's a really cool system as well, by the way. So basically, you have a point-buy system. So you, instead of in Commands and Colors Ancients or Napoleonics, for example, where it tells you what units you start with, you can pick what units you get. You've got points that you can spend.
I always like that.
And what you can do is, at the start of the game, you've got a whole bunch of hexes that's written on your scenario card that is where you can set your units up. But you get little cards that you put down, which has got each sort of unit that you control on it, but you also get a bunch of decoy cards so that you can put the decoy cards down. So both players put all their cards down and then flip them all up and put their units in. And what I was doing was I was splitting my forces up into little groups so that I would have... This person's going to go to this spot and hold it. These two units are going to defend that person or aggressively go after people that are potentially threats to them, for example. And that's what I was doing. I was having people in the left flank going for this spot, people in the right flank going for that spot, people in the centre going for that spot, and there are little sort of harassment units around them and stuff like that.
Nice.
And that's how I set the thing up, and it worked.
Yeah. I mean, you certainly managed to get... I think because you were able to kind of keep me back and hold on to the positions you needed to get the points, because basically it did come down to essentially what you were saying before, that you were getting more points than me for enough turns that you put yourself ahead of me that there was no way I was going to catch up to you at that point. But yeah, so you kind of you identify points that you're going for, and then you just send in forces, little skirmishing forces for each one, rather than trying to build a line. Although I still found myself kind of, certainly with the infantry units, trying to do that, and I was like, did they need to be there? Probably not. I think now knowing that, it'd probably be a bit more, split them up a bit more, because they're even the infantry units do, they can do a fair bit of damage. I mean, I took out quite a lot of your sort of your harder units just with infantry.
Oh
basically.
Yeah, man, you totally wiped out all my little dog things. Whatever they were. They
fast
as hell.
They were causing me annoyance.
Little things that would just basically obliterate people if you let them.
Aye.
And Euan just saw them as a threat straight away and just wiped out both units. They just killed them.
I went all out on them because the other thing that I used in that, there's the lore.
Yep.
There's a whole round of lore, and they basically have special cards that can do sort of magical or just odd things.
Which is a completely new thing for this, for the Commands and Colors system. It's not in any other game, because obviously it's a fantasy thing, so they've added in this magic system. So every turn you'll get lore, or there's a lore symbol in the dice, and if you roll that when you're attacking, you get lore. Yeah. And it's just a bunch of little tokens that you get up, and then you've got some cards in your hand, and they've got a cost, and you can play them whenever it says. And they can do some pretty cool things. Yeah. For example, you can make... I had one when I played the other night there, not against you, where I played somebody else, which really, really annoyed them, which was basically like magical arrows or something like that, which would basically like your archers could ignore all blocking terrain and units, could shoot straight through them basically. So like I was just like shooting through hills and killing people, and just for that turn sort of thing. And it's just little cool things that you can do that add a bit more fantasy flavour to the system.
That sounds really cool. I like it.
Aye. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the game. I love the commands and colour systems. I love the way the commands and colours system works. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically you get a bunch of command cards. You play one, it will say something like you can move 2 units on the left, or 3 units on the right, or 1 unit in each section, because the board's split into sections. And then you just do that. And when you move those units, you can shoot with them or like do melee combat with them. Yeah. And then you roll your dice and do the damage depending on what your cards say and stuff like that. And it's a really simple system, and it's quick. It plays in about, I mean, how long did our Battle War game play? About an hour. A good chunk of that was setting up. Yeah. Because you had to sit and think about what army you were going to buy and set up, how you were going to set them up and stuff like that.
To play through the scenario is quite simple.
So you can play it, you could probably play a game in half an hour once you get the hang of it, basically. Really quick to play, quite easy rules. I think Battle Lore's actually, it sounds more complicated than Ancients and stuff, but there's a lot less to keep track of.
That's the thing, like, I mean, with all the sort of embellishments they've added to it, it still seems really kind of, like, well balanced. You'd think that there would be problems in it, because there is a lot of differences in units and things like that, but it does work really well.
Yeah.
Well, we need to play it sometime.
I still think that the purest commands and colours thing, though, is that Ancients 3-a-side on the epic Ancients version that they did of it, which is basically like having you can have up to 4 people on each side, and we played it. We did play it once with 3-a-side, wasn't it?
I think it was 3-a-side, yeah.
And basically, you assign people to either, like, they get one flank, and you have somebody in the centre, and the person in the centre is like the overall commander of the army. They hold the cards. They can give cards to their lieutenants. Basically, there's rules about what you can and can't say to them and stuff like that. So you can hand somebody a card, but you're not allowed to tell them what to do with it. Just hope for the best, and you've just got this massive board that's got lots of units on it, and everybody just piling into each other.
It takes a hell of setting up, but it's a lot of fun.
It's fun. It is a hell of a lot of fun. The epic version of Commands and Colours Ancients, it's really good.
It sounds quite chaotic, but I suppose this is exactly what a battlefield should be.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's trying to simulate. The reason why you're not allowed to speak. Well, you can in certain situations, depending on the cards.
Passing like notes between generals.
In Ancient Warfare, that was what happened. You know,
of course, yeah.
You would just put somebody in charge of a flank or something, and then just like you'd have to leave them to get on with it, because you can't be sending runners to them constantly. So yeah. Anyway, Battle War, and I have to point out this is the 2nd edition.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a 1st edition, never played it. This is the 2nd edition, and I think it's
probably pretty good. It was obviously maybe more polished than the original, and there might have been some issues presumably with.
Well, I don't know if it's issues. It's just
maybe it's just about miniatures. I mean, these are fairly nice.
There's an evolution of board games, I think, where like certain things come into flavour and stuff like that, and certain things just sort of like they get a bit old and stale, sort of thing, and they'll try and update things and modernise them. And Fantasy Flight in particular do this quite a lot. Okay. They're the Games Workshop of the board game world.
They're actually good.
They're neutral good. As opposed to chaotic evil.
Yes.
Right.
Enough of the RPG chat.
So, Battle War.
Yeah.
Good game.
Great bunch of lads.
You want to give it a rating, Euan?
I'll give it one for the gyre falcon or whatever. Pigeon.
Oh, the gyro pigeon.
Gyro pigeon.
One gyro pigeon.
One gyro pigeon.
Right, excellent. Good rating.
And that's good enough.
Right.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
I managed to squeeze in a game of something else.
Alright.
So you guys haven't played this. This is the only other game I've really managed to play in the past couple of weeks. This is The Pursuit of Happiness.
That's fine. I've already, I've got that.
What? You've got The Pursuit of
You're
Happiness.
You're not pursuing it.
No.
You're holding on to it, not letting it escape.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
in a cage of some kind.
No, you can't cage happiness, man. You have to exploit it.
So here's some names for you. So this is The Pursuit of Happiness, designed by David Chirkop, Adrian Abella, with Vangelis Baggiarticus.
Shit.
What a name.
Well, these dudes certainly know how to pursue happiness.
Is it the actual Vangelis, do you think?
I don't know. I think everything rhymes with that.
Oh, right.
This is by Artepia Games, who have done a couple other things, I think, and I just can't put my finger on what they are.
So, by the look of the actual box and the cover art on it, I presume that to achieve happiness, you have to go to someplace exotic.
No, so to achieve happiness in this game,
I see palm trees and sun.
To achieve true happiness in this game, you have to die.
No, I'm sorry. Now I'm depressed.
So stop, right?
Oh man, you just ruined it for me. I was gonna say I want to play it.
Right. Hang on. So think of this game. You ever played the game of life, or life as it's just called in America?
I played Game of Life.
You've played Game of Life when you were a kid.
I'm confused. I'm living just now.
It had a very. In fact, all I really remember about Game of Life is mucking about with the board. I don't think I actually played a game of the spinner and just all the sort of bits that went in, all the plasticky bits and
it was
the
a nice
cars.
board.
It was a very nice board.
But yeah, so think of the Game of Life and cross it with The Sims. And you've kind of got maybe the life of one sim in The Sims, and you've kind of got what you're playing as in the pursuit of happiness. Okay, this is basically a life simulator, if you will. It's a bit tongue in cheek. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
So what? So the premise is you've got your toon, and he or she has to go through their life and die, and then you judge whether they've been happy.
Well, yeah, because as you're going through life, you're getting what they call long-term happiness in this game. So long-term happiness is the ultimate goal. It's basically the points. Yeah. It's the points in this game.
You're
right?
playing a sort of St. Peter sort of figure that you look at and going, well,
oh my God.
But there are certain life
let's
goals.
Let's talk the victory points here.
And when you die, if you fulfilled certain things of those life goals, then you get extra points for it. So dying's actually, it's pretty good for your long-term happiness, apparently.
Well...
Right. This is essentially a card game with some worker placement element to it. Alright? So what you actually get in this is, you start the game, everybody gets a random child trait. So this is something that you bring through from childhood, and that can be stuff like you might be artistic, or you might be playful, or something like that. That will give you some sort of bonus throughout the whole of the game. Right. So that gives your character a wee bit of flavour.
Sort of focus.
Yeah, so something to focus on.
Do you get disadvantages?
No.
Aww.
I mean, you could kind of see
pretty sure
some
that
things.
most children are just selfish bastards.
Well, that's true. But, you know, children can be playful.
This game's assuming that you grow out of that.
I know.
Right. So you start the game as a teenager, and then as you go through the game, you basically play through as an adult, and then you hit old age. Now, when you hit old age, there's a chance that you're going to die. As just like everybody.
This game is depressing.
You described the sort of death procedure, and it's sort of similar to what we were talking about the last time with the what's it called, that house betrayal at House on the Hill, where you had a check that you had to make every round, and basically it was more and more likely you were going to fail it as you went on.
Okay. What happens is that you have something in this game called stress, alright, like you do in real life. Okay. Now there's a stress meter. At the start of the game, you kind of start sort of slap bang in the middle of this stress meter, basically. It's very difficult to reduce your stress in this game, okay? It's quite easy to increase it. Now, if you increase it past a certain point, you die, okay? Now, and I'm making this game sound depressing, but I've not even had a chance to explain how it works yet.
Is that you just jumping off a bridge, or...?
No, it's just because old age causes stress, alright? You just start... Your knees start to go, man, you know, that liver isn't working the way it used to because you drank a lot when you were younger.
Some of us may have, yeah.
Well, some of us still do. But, you know, if you go off this track, you die, okay? Now, when you hit old age, you get loads of stress. The first step in old age gives you 3 stress, and the next step in old age gives you 6 stress. Right. In the highly unlikely event that you're still alive at the end of that, the next step gives you 9, and you will die, okay?
This game shouldn't be called what it's called.
But let's get to the happy bit, alright?
Okay.
So, what you've got in this game, like I say, you start with your child trait, and there's just a bunch of cards on the board. Now, there's different things. You've got activities, you've got items, you've got projects, you have jobs, and you have relationships. Okay, so those are the 4 basic types of card. And you have a bunch of hourglasses, which basically show how much time you have to spend.
I'm getting more and more depressed now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Right. So there's a bunch of spaces on the board as well, and they can have stuff like, you know, you get study and play, you get interact, you've got take a project, you've got spend money, you've got get a temporary job, You've got get a full-time job, you've got develop a relationship, and overtime. You can also rest if you like to. Now, what you're doing is you're taking your little hourglasses and you're putting them on those spaces that I just described. So if you wanted to take a project, then you put your marker on the project thing, you take one of the projects from the board. Now, the project cards, I'm just going to dig some of these out, actually, because they're quite interesting, some of them. See, for example, we've got Write a Play. Okay, so
or start a podcast about board games.
Yep, there we go. So we've got Write a Play. Now, as you can see here, but you guys can see this, it's kind of split into sections, this card. Now, when you take a project, you keep that project in front of you, basically, until you're done with it. And what you do is you put your marker on the first space in that track. Now, that's got a cost on it. So there's different types of resources in this game, and they correspond with your different, like your interact, your study, and your play things. So you've got like your study gives you knowledge, your play gives you creativity, and your interact gives you, I think it's social points or something like that. So the first stage of Write a Play costs you one creativity. Alright, and that's called inspiration. So you put that on there, and then you get the reward that's next to it. In this instance, it actually gives you 2 study points. So you would spend 1 creativity point and you would get 2 study points. Okay. The next stage of it costs you 1 time marker. So if you want to develop this project further, you're going to have to spend some time on it. And then 2 creativity, but then you get some short-term happiness and long-term happiness. Okay? And then you'll keep going through that. The costs get more and more. So you've got the next stage is 1 time marker, 2 creativity, 2 social points, which gives you 3 knowledge and 3 long-term happiness. And the last stage gives you 2 social points and 6 long-term happiness. So you just keep building through your project as you're going through your life. Once it's completed, you put it aside.
Can you have multiple projects?
You can have multiple projects, but if you have too much stuff in front of you, it causes you stress. Alright, so...
And the likelihood of you finishing 2 projects at the same time is probably pretty tough.
Well, I know it can be done. When I played through it, I've only played it once, but I definitely had 2 projects in front of me at one time.
I suppose 2 is not too bad.
However, it's not just projects. Because if you're in a relationship, that's also includes one of your 3 cards. Having a job includes one of your 3 cards. Because obviously these are all things that are going to... if you take on too much, it's going to stress you out. It makes thematic sense.
So thematically, if you have a job and a relationship, do you still have time for projects?
Yes, but you have to decide how much time you're going to spend on it. Now, you start off with the... Let's have a look at some of the other cards. Things like when you spend, you can buy things like a stereo system, even stuff like a hot tub. The spend cards tend to have different spaces on them. So this TV card, for example, this has got the first stage is a second-hand CRT, the next stage is HD ready, the bottom stage is a home theatre.
Does it take away your creativity?
No, but you can go in at any point on that. It costs money. Getting money generally is from working your job.
Hey, anyone can get into the digital revolution.
Yep.
You just have to have the money.
Now, once you take one of these,
play the game.
Once you take one of these cards, one of these item cards, you go in at whatever level you want, you can afford. It might cost you an upkeep as the game goes on. So, for example, if you get a home theatre, it costs you 7 to take it, and it also costs you 6 every round.
Oh my god!
But every round, as you pay that 6, you get 2 long-term happiness.
So now that we finally get to the meat of the game, which is judging what really brings you happiness.
Yes.
Does writing a play give you more happiness than having a HD TV?
Do you want me to check that?
Yes, please. Let's check some proper artistic accomplishments and measure it against materialistic possessions.
If you publish your play, so if you get to the last step on it, you'll have got 10 long-term happiness total.
Now, that makes sense. It's you've
rewarding
worked on it for many years.
Yes.
You've accomplished something great.
If you get your home theatre, you get 2 long-term happiness immediately, as soon as you buy it. And then as long as you keep paying your 6 every round, you'll get 2 every round.
And how many rounds roughly in a game?
I think there's about 6 before you hit old age.
So if you have HD TV all your life, you get about... plenty. 6, 12, 14?
Yeah, there's not very much chance of you doing that though, because...
Oh, you can't afford a HD TV for your kid.
Basically, well, when you're a teenager, you're probably not going to be able to afford that. Especially because if you can't pay for it in the next round, if you can't pay that cost in the next round, you lose it and it causes you stress. for losing the thing that you love.
Parting with your baby, yeah. Okay.
So
all right.
There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of different ways of getting long-term happiness. I mean, you've got the relationships and stuff. You can have multiple relationships.
Does it cause you stress?
Yes.
Man, I'm beginning to realise if I played this game, I would actually not focus on playing it at all. I would just judge the developers
but that's the thing,
every single
that's the
round.
thing. I think, Pawel, you're trying to look for an objectivity about human worth and life that just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, Pawel.
I studied psychology.
So, but I guess it allows you to some extent to like tailor your life to. So, you know, if you are playing it as you're going to go for like being Mr. Moneybags, you're going to have like a really fancy job, make loads of money, then it makes sense to get your happiness from having things because you can afford to have things. But then you can go for a more creative route and things
that's
like
it.
that.
I mean, and the thing is about the jobs is that the chances of you being able to get a high job at the start of the game are pretty low because it costs a lot of resources to get a high level job. But you can go in at the low level, so you can go in at like a level 1, science job or something like that, and you'll get maybe 6 coins a round out of doing that. The thing is, you also have to devote time to that every round, and if you don't, then you lose the job basically.
Yeah, that sounds like my life.
Same with relationships. Once you get past the date stage, and you know, you can go on a date with somebody and it gives you like a one-off bonus, but they tend not to give you
oh my god,
like turn-by-turn bonuses. If you develop it into a full relationship, alright, then you have to start using time, and it's going to start costing you resources every round, but you'll get some reward. You'll get maybe long-term happiness, or you might get some actual resources, because you could get in a relationship with somebody who, as the cards are kind of implying that this person might be really creative. So they'll give you creative points that you can then spend.
There's some, you know.
So yeah, there's potential for comboing all your cards up. So like you can say, okay, I'm going to get this job. It's going to cost me, 2 like study points every turn. I'm not actually making any study points, but if I get in a relationship with this really intelligent person, then they can give me study points that I can then use on that job, sort of thing. So it you can start comboing it up. Yeah.
It's not just happiness that your relationship gives you, it's also your
your
partner actually enriches you in some way.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's actually probably the first positive thing I heard about this game.
But one of the other
I'm still depressed though.
One of the other interesting things is that relationship cards, so the actual different people you have a female side and a male side, and they're identical on both sides, these cards. So
nice.
So you can choose which...
but they're still blue and pink.
They're blue and pink because sexism, but...
oh, come on, if they were just a black and white photo of a man or woman, or a silhouette of a man or woman, it would be pretty boring, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we should just come up with other colours. Green and orange.
At the beginning of the game, there's also life goals, and these are shared by everybody, so these are put out on the table, and whoever achieves them can score points. So, for example, Zen, enter old age with the least amount of stress compared to everybody else. And if you do that, you'll get 4 long-term happiness. But there's also one called Live Fast, Die Young, which is basically if you're the first person to die, you get shitloads of points for it.
So it'll be an interesting one to try and play it that way.
That's cool.
Yeah. You've also got, here's one, you can't take it with you. Oh no, you can take it with you. It's called Have the Most Money at Death.
Oh,
so that'll be the guy that owns the HD TV thing and everything. Yeah, so.
But I mean, there's other things like family oriented. Be the first one to raise family with a partner, career oriented, have the highest level of job.
How do you translate life goals though? Is this something that your parents give you?
I don't think the game is taking it as seriously as you're trying to apply. I think you're overthinking this, Pawel.
Definitely.
You're definitely overthinking it.
I enjoy overthinking stuff.
There are other cards in the game, for example, like the project cards. Some of these are like they only last one turn. You have to choose one thing on it basically, and they can be thing like entering a game show or something like that. And
that brings you a lot of stress and some resources if you win.
But yeah, you'll get, maybe if you enter the game show, you might get a shitload of money if you manage to spend enough resources on it.
Loads of stress.
There's also shared projects, so like you can do things like start a study group, and other people can participate in that. And the more people that participate, the more rewards everybody gets.
All right. So there is actual interactivity.
There is some interaction there.
It's not just every person playing their own game.
No, not at all. Not at all. Okay. And because the cards are all there to be picked, and when you take a card, nobody else can get that. I mean, it's an indirect thing,
so you can rig somebody else's game so that they get more and more stressed.
Basically, yeah.
All right, 'cause I know people like that.
I suppose you need some sort of effect on each other. Because I suppose the one thing that's coming through this is that, and I suppose it's just a hangover of sort of the Euro game style of it, is that the one objective thing that you can take away from this is that being efficient will be the only true trait to a happy life and to a prosperous life. And I think that's the one thing that we can all take away from these types of games.
Yeah, I think this translates into life fairly well.
Oh, absolutely.
I've learned something from it.
Yeah. The one, I don't know why this has been coming into my mind in terms of comparing it to other games, but there's certain elements of this that remind me of, and I'm sure we talked about this on the last episode, was Through the Ages.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I've got a bit of a
Through
the Ages feel to it, sort of abstracted, because essentially playing through the history of a civilization is like playing through the life of a person. Really,
we're getting very philosophical now.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, Through the Ages is so abstracted that it could be compared to something like this.
So if a civilization builds
and some of the
a wonder, for example, Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Like a project.
And if you're a person, you do, what is that? Oh God, yes, please. So this is a project card.
Yeah, I've just handed Pawel a project
role-playing
card.
group.
So this is one that all players can participate in. So you can jump in and you can be the dungeon master, you can be a cleric, you can be a wizard.
Nice.
Clearly, the game master gets all the resources in sort of mediocre amount, whereas all the other people in the group, I suppose, get inspired in various ways.
I quite like what they did with that one, because like the wizard, for example, has to spend knowledge points or gains knowledge points or something like that. And
so what's the golden one? Rogue spending 6 idea creativity, and Paladin is spending 6 social points. Yeah. Awesome. That makes sense, actually. Brilliant.
Pretty cool.
That's
so yeah, the Pursuit of Happiness. I mean, there are other games out there. I mean, it feels almost like you were saying, there's like Through the Ages and stuff maybe coming through in it and stuff like that. It does feel a little bit like a mishmash of other games, if you see what I mean. But at the same time, the theme is what is important with this game. There's no other. I don't think there's any other sort of like life simulator games that have come out recently, modern ones. I mean, because the only other one I can think of is Game of Life. So.
And that was just that was basically snakes and ladders on a more complicated board, from what I can remember. It wasn't anything particularly special.
And what's quite satisfying about this game is once the game comes to an end, you can sit back, look at the pile of cards that you've put aside or the things that you've bought and everything, and actually just think about, what's this person's life been like?
Oh my God, I'm getting depressed again.
Put a narrative together, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's it. And
can't really do that with a lot of.
And then you start thinking about your own life.
Well, no, I don't.
You start playing.
I avoid that at all costs.
Alright.
Don't consider anything.
So here is a game that helps you actually dissect life, divide it into small pieces and start valuing what you're doing.
So, just so I'm clear, each round is essentially a stage in life. It's not like you're.
It's not a year or anything. It's just
it's
a stage of your adult life, basically.
Okay. But each round is played and you all move on at the same pace.
Yes,
basically.
Oh,
that's cool.
But yeah, it's pretty good. So that's.
Sorry, because Euan asked earlier, was there an actual system for deciding when exactly you die?
Yeah,
the stress level.
Yeah. Oh, just the stress level.
Yeah. So you can die before other people, and they would continue playing the game. But it's kind of set up so that it's highly unlikely that you're going to die that early, that you're going to be sitting there for an hour waiting for other people to play. You'd probably find that people would die in one round and the other people would die in the next round. So. But yeah, that's the Pursuit of Happiness by Artipia Games. Check it out if you like a.
My stress level has risen just listening to this.
Don't let it get to you, man. It's only a game.
Right, well, we're going to have a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about some fun video games.
Video games.
Let's
be back in a minute. And we're back, and Pawel is still stressed out about the Pursuit of Happiness.
Because you've made him think about how to pursue happiness.
That's the thing. Happiness should just come to you on its own. If you start thinking about how to pursue it, It's just stressful.
As the existential dread setting.
Very much so, yes. Yes, I can feel it.
Okay, well, try and relieve yourself a bit. Not that way, but talk about a game that you've been playing.
Yes, let's talk about some fun for a change, yes. Rise of the Tomb Raider came out yesterday. I think I was in game on Princess Street a couple of minutes past 10 a.m. No, sorry, past 8 a.m. even. Picked it up and then took a day off from work because that's what you do. And so, yeah, I think the way we could talk about it is by mentioning our recent chat about Deus Ex, yeah?
Okay.
Because...
well, that chat would convince you that it wasn't as good as you thought it was.
your main line... Well, I had other reasons to also assume that, yes.
It was a complex discussion with lots of facets.
Which we won.
Well, no, what I was trying to do is I was trying to... I didn't accept your arguments, I just added my own.
Denial's a terrible thing, man.
I think so too. See, if you play any Lara Croft game, really, any Tomb Raider game, essentially it's going to be the same thing, yes? Mm-hmm. You've got a third-person action game with shooting elements, yeah? Plenty of jumping, some puzzles, environmental puzzles. And that's it, yes? Some of these games have been adding story or character arcs, plot lines as we go through the ages, and it's now been 20 years of Lara Croft with us, which is... a remarkable achievement, and definitely this is a very iconic character as well, which makes me particularly happy that they've remade the franchise a good couple of years ago and made what we've just checked was titled Tomb Raider. So Rise of the Tomb Raider is a bit of a strange title because she actually had her remake in the previous game, and previous game you would start as a very sort of young Lara Croft that wasn't the adventurer that we know, and she grew to be a kick-ass heroine, you know, with blazing guns and whatsoever, and killing, 50 dudes with shotguns in one go. Which was pretty much what the last battles and the previous game were.
They got pretty epic.
They were really epic, including demons with you know, like in samurai.
Well, there always has to be that stuff in the Tomb Raider game. There's always a certain point that comes, and that's like, you know, just a classic Tomb Raider thing, that there's always going to be some supernatural element
which is great, definitely, because it's about adventure, it's about discovering something hidden and something possibly long lost. Because otherwise, you know, modern world is way too boring. You just pursue happiness in it. So, Rise of Tomb Raider is a sequel to the remake. We live in 21st century, so this is pretty much what 21st century is like.
Just remakes.
We play sequels to remakes, yes.
We hope that the remake gets a sequel.
Pretty much. So, it naturally follows... I'm not going to say it follows the story because it really doesn't. It follows the character in terms of a franchise as, I'm not going to say big, but rather as old as Tomb Raider. Everything rests on the shoulders of the character as such, whereas plotlines aren't really that important. In every game, you'll essentially have something that the character is trying to find, uncover, discover, you name it. You're going to have a very similar scenario in Uncharted games, which, to me... You know, Nathan Drake is really just a cheap Lara offshoot. But in any case, there's going to be people that disagree.
I was almost waiting for somebody in the street or something to just shout, "Fuck off!"
Well, I suppose Nathan Drake was there when Lara Croft buggered off for the years that she was. Her games were either non-existent or completely subpar.
Truth be told, yes.
Nathan Drake was there.
Modern Lara is actually taking
a lot more cues from
Nathan. Yeah. Yes, that's very true. Yeah, but then again, Nathan wouldn't be there if not for Lara. So it's a little bit of a exchange of ideas and concepts between them.
Do you ever see them in the same room?
Are you saying they? Oh, that's interesting.
There you go.
That's interesting.
There you go.
Might just be.
Well, I mean, it's certainly, if you think about why in Uncharted 4, Nathan Drake looks nothing like Nathan Drake. He looks like a completely different person. Like a sort of weird cross between like Ken Marino and I can't remember who the other person he sort of looked like. The bloke who played the Punisher, I think.
I was thinking the same guy. I can't remember his name.
Bit of that. John Bernthal.
Bernthal.
Yeah. So maybe that was just that she lost the original mask and had to just find a different one.
Lara kept changing her face through the ages as well. You can even get nowadays these, because this is the 20th anniversary. You'll get whatever artworks on the net with 9 different Laras sitting in the same bar and things like this.
No.
And I should also mention that this newest... the Rise of Tomb Raider actually came out a year ago on Xbox One, which I think none of us have.
No.
Nobody has an Xbox.
So that's that. If you're looking for news about Xbox One, just go to a different podcast. Thank you very much.
Don't think we should.
But no, I've got a PC, so I don't need an Xbox. Yeah. Really,
do you have Windows 10 on it though?
No.
Yeah, see, I was hoping that I could play Gears of War 4 on my PC, but I still have Windows 7.
I've still got Windows 7. Yeah. I'm old school.
I'm to be fair, Windows 10 is alright, but I just kept getting really annoyed by those pop-ups. So it's just like, I'm not gonna bloody upgrade because you're telling me to upgrade.
That's it. I was just in denial.
But one of these days, companies are going to learn that people they're going to have to start incorporating reverse psychology into their marketing. Otherwise, they're not going to sell anything. People are getting more and more cynical, and the market's not catching up.
So, Rise of Tomb Raider then is pretty much what Tomb Raider was in terms of gameplay. And I remember us talking about how Deus Ex didn't really differ much from the previous Deus Ex. There were no additional ideas, no additional gameplay types, just a new setting and a new story. So there you go, Tomb Raider, exactly the same thing. You won't have new gadgets as such, or possibly you'll have maybe one extra gadget, but it doesn't dramatically alter anything, yeah? You're still running around, climbing things, potentially shooting some folks or stealth killing them if there is an opportunity. But this is a franchise that essentially releases new stories for the same game. And it's always been like this, and I'm guessing this is just the way it's going to be, because if you actually dramatically change something and go from your regular, say, Resident Evil to suddenly Resident Evil 4, which is a shooter game, then all your old school fans of regular sort of half isometric Resident Evils get annoyed. I personally quite enjoyed Resident Evil 4, but I know plenty of folks that were diehard Resident Evil fans and really, got offended by the change.
Any of them got thumbs, like left thumbs at all?
Some of them.
Just be dealing with that horrendous controls system on there. I can understand a fondness for or that sort of nostalgia for that sort of stuff, but Jesus. Because at least I'll say one thing about the original. I mean, I take it you played like the old Tomb Raider games.
Possibly
on the
played all of them,
PlayStation ones.
Yes.
I mean, the thing about that,
I grew up with Lara Croft.
Worked the same way. They had this particular control system that was rooted in the sort of the limitations of 3D games at the time. But they kind of worked out a good system where everything was you used the D-pad and everything was very precise because everything was you could kind of see what the polygons were for everything. So you based everything on that. Like how long you needed to run to do a jump that was going to get you across a certain size of ledge and things like that. And they didn't change that at all, but it was popular and it worked quite well. Whereas I think if you're talking about Resident Evil, that was a system that just was completely shonky, totally like just annoying to play. Let's not beat about the bush.
I think you've got the point. I used to quite like Resident Evil, but the old school Resident Evil is probably for the diehards nowadays. Yeah. You get there was a remake of the original game released on PlayStation Plus recently.
Yeah,
and it's got all the I'm going to say all the flows you would expect from it. So you're going to have your save points only in specific places. You're going to have a lot of backtracking. All the things that probably players nowadays don't really have patience for.
Oh well. So for Tomb Raider anyway.
So we're actually talking about Tomb Raider then.
Yeah, I was wondering when we were going to steer back to that.
Well, tell us a bit about the setting for the new one, because
because the previous one was on a sort of lost, exotic, tropical, sort of Japanese island. Mm-hmm. This one is taking place in Siberia, so it's very snowy, very cold. Lara is always shivering, and you need your whatever. Just like in the previous game, you're sort of you get these checkpoints on the map where you're setting up camps. This is where you can upgrade your whatever equipment, buy additional skills and things like this. But apart from the fact that it's snowy now and not tropical, it's pretty much still the same thing. It's not an open world game because it never was. It's always puzzles prepared for you, just like in Uncharted. Apart from probably Uncharted 4, which is trying to be slightly more open worldly. I've not actually played the fourth one yet.
Pavel, back to Tomb Raider.
What? Can we not talk about Uncharted now? This is actually... I'm sorry. Yes, I fully agree that Deus Ex and Resident Evil are not relevant to Tomb Raider in the slightest. But Uncharted actually is, because they're very similar games. Hello, let's talk about Tomb Raider then.
Well, the original, the first remake Tomb Raider had actually quite an open world feel to it. I mean, you could traverse around that entire, the playable parts of that island as one thing. And yet, you had the pre-prepared puzzles, but they would actually be quite cleverly worked into like how you moved around that map, and you unlocked new areas and things by completing
same
some of
thing
those
here. You're gonna have your first 2 or 3 stages that serve more like a tutorial, and from a story point of view that serve as whatever happened to you, you've managed to recover and can now start sort of mastering up for your adventure, get more equipment, get more experience, tough up, because Lara is still fairly, let's say, a newbie, and she has to grow again, which is a little bit... I've had from certain people commentary that Lara was already a kick-ass or badass person at the end of the previous game, and suddenly she just got downgraded again to a fresh greenhorn explorer who has to mature up again. But I suppose, this was the narrative that was really well received in the first game, so they just sort of redoing it again.
But have they maybe changed about the survival elements? Because, presumably at the start of this game, she at least knows she's going in to raid a tomb, to do some exploring or whatever, whereas the first Tomb Raider, you're just dumped onto an island and it's all about the survival and the fact that you're basically being hounded by these crazy cult folk or whatever.
Indeed. Well, there is crazy cult in this game as well. And actually, to my surprise, Rise of Tomb Raider is very Christian-like. I mean, you get the baddies in the game, because there's always some sort of usually rich antagonist who can afford to hire henchmen. Yeah, it's important in games like this. And then here you have something that sort of works like Illuminati or something, or Templars from the Assassin games. So you get a religious secret cult that is trying to steer the future of humanity or whatever, who clearly are very Christian. Followers of God and whatsoever, and through the, I suppose, 300s of years or millennia or whatsoever, they are hunting the prophet. And you get these religious hints through the game that really makes you think that at some point you'll either get to shoot Jesus or save him. There's going to be Jesus somewhere in the game, because prophet is everywhere. Every single bloody relic you find, whatever historical notes that
has a finger that points. Man, Jesus is over this way.
I would love to see a company that makes a AAA game in which, at some point, you had to shoot Jesus.
Get one of those classic binary moral choices.
Who's brave enough? Come on.
But, like in the classic Christian whatever mythology, you get these wounds on the palms, yeah.
Yeah.
So
what are they called again?
Stigmata.
Yes, exactly. So I haven't played. I've only started playing the game, and then I sort of stopped to come over here and talk about it, which doesn't make me very qualified to do it just yet. But one of the main buddies in the game actually has a stigmata on his hand,
Right.
and they keep referring to God, and they're just hunting this false prophet who apparently is a heretic. However, from every single document you find, it feels like he's Jesus, pretty much.
Right.
So I have no idea where it leads.
So there's no hint of any of the sort of supernatural stuff going on. It's
there's going to be.
I mean, there's
definitely
referred to,
it's
but nothing
Tomb Raider.
your character has physically experienced so far.
Well, nothing just yet, but in games like Tomb Raider or Uncharted, supernatural elements usually come in the third act. Yes.
Yeah, well, yes.
When
If we're talking storytelling terms, if we're getting into the
yeah. So I'm sure this is bound to happen. But apart from that, what we're seeing here is really the same winning formula. It's the same game it was, and it's brilliant. It's really pretty. It's really well done. It's well acted, and I'm quite enjoying it so far.
Cool. So I'm not really. From what I'm trying to think of what Tomb Raider games I've played, and I don't think the list is that long. Possibly just one of them.
Yeah. Probably one of the original trilogy.
Yeah, one of the original ones, because I remember that I just got a great kick when I was younger, like I was a young teenager, of making Lara just dive off of things onto concrete.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was just
there was some pretty
the only thing I really remember.
But that's not Chris being misogynistic. It's Chris pretty much kills.
That's just how I play games.
Everybody in
it's not
video
gender
games.
related.
Oh yeah. I don't care who dies as long as people do.
Yeah.
Good philosophy.
I've played all 9 of them. I haven't completed all 9 of them because some of them were really poor in the past. But these 2 latest games are amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So you're enjoying it then?
Absolutely.
Good lad. Okay.
So more of that later as I
Possibly.
play through the game
I
and
may
complete it.
consider getting fired into that one as well, because I didn't really enjoy the first one.
Before we just quickly go, the PS4 version, I may have mentioned this on our Twitter as well, it has actually got a very pretty addition, because this being a 20th anniversary, the disc case is actually designed to look like a wee book with artwork inside, and that works really well. And what's probably important is that if you buy the PS4 edition, you get all the DLC already on it, and including some DLCs that Xbox One doesn't even have, which one of them I think is Lara pretty much just fighting off endless hordes of zombies in her manner, which just sounds awesome.
There's always
Zombie
a zombie
DLC.
version. Yeah, always a zombie version.
Every time.
Yes.
What will we shovel into this game and make people pay for?
Now,
Zombies. Everybody's
can I just
completely
say,
credulous when it comes to zombies.
ever since I was just because we have to have another anecdote that has nothing to do with Tomb Raider.
Okay.
Ever since I turned like 10, I haven't played a football game. I refuse to. But if there was ever a zombie DLC to a FIFA game, I would bloody buy it. I really want to play a game versus zombies.
You're onto something there, I think.
I would expect to see that before Christmas.
I hope so, certainly.
Certainly in time for the January sales.
The bargain bucket.
Aye.
Right, that's Rise of the Tomb Raider by Crystal Dynamics. So that came out on Xbox last November.
Yeah. Which annoyed the hell out of me and quite a lot of people, because Lara was always a PlayStation person.
Yeah, but presumably Microsoft punted a massive amount of money to the developers for that.
So
And
thanks very
probably
much, Microsoft.
Probably have not really done themselves any favours by having
No,
done
the
it.
game
So,
the game hasn't sold that well. I'm hoping it's gonna sell well now, because I want them to keep making those games.
It also came out on Microsoft Windows in January this year, and the PlayStation 4 version came out yesterday, October the 11th.
Happy times and days off.
Indeed. Right, let's move on then to something I've been playing. So something I streamed last night. I actually got around to streaming for my monthly stream, as it seems to be becoming a monthly stream now.
Check out Chris's Twitch channel for all the best streaming.
So I played something which was, I think it was a Kickstarter, but I didn't take part in this Kickstarter. I just picked it up. And it is Halcyon 6 Starbase Commander.
Is that how you pronounce it?
I think so.
Okay.
Halcyon, or it's Halcyon, is it? Yeah,
that's
Halcyon.
right. Pretty sure. I used to have trouble with that one. I always said Halicon.
Halicon.
Because I would read it and the letters would be round the other way in my head. So.
Oh yeah. Right, so guess what you do in this game?
You command some kind of starbase.
Well, boy, you're onto something.
I wasn't even sure that was
so
the word I was
yes,
looking
you're
for.
commanding a starbase, but I mean, the game is essentially it's a sort of one of these like space strategy things, which you're going to talk about a game like that very soon.
Looking forward.
But let's call this a bit more dumbed down version because you're going to talk about Endless Space too soon.
Which obviously is a much more double A
Yes,
thing.
but it has roughly the same idea, but it's got a lot of differences in it. In particular, that the combat in it is basically like a JRPG combat.
Alright.
So like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or something like that. It's kind of weird. So instead of you having like masses of ships all shooting the shit out of each other, you've got like maximum 3 ships on the screen against whatever ships that you're fighting against, and it's turn-based. And you can do all different moves and stuff like that. So you might smash a ship's shields down.
It really sounds JRPG.
And then you can take advantage of that by. So what's really interesting about that in this sort of combat mode is that the debuffs and the buffs are really important in this game.
Right.
Like really important. So like you can do things like one of your ships might be able to take out a ship's weapon system or something like that, or disable it for a couple of turns, and you might have another ship which will totally exploit that. So like and it tells you on the things, it looks really complicated at first, but when you hover over the different abilities, it will just say, this inflicts this and exploits this, and does this damage and stuff like that. So yeah, you can do stuff like that way. But the weird thing about it is that it takes stuff out of XCOM as well. So the actual starbase commanding side of it, that Xbox, XCOM sort of screen where you're building up your little rooms and stuff like that. It does that in this game.
That's good.
Now you have it's actually quite a big starbase, and the idea is that you're part of the Terran Federation. That old chestnut.
Good old Terrans.
And the Federation has basically just been crippled, and you might be the last starbase surviving this. And your starbase has been pretty much ruined. So there's just loads of rooms in your starbase that are just covered in crap, and you have to clear them out before you can build stuff. Just like in XCOM, you've got to dig them out and stuff like that. Interestingly, though, when you clear some of these rooms out, you might get little random events. You might get little combats with aliens that have got inside and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool.
That's something that XCOM 2 should have bloody had, because it was a crashed alien craft.
Yeah,
but I mean, I've only played like a couple of hours of it, but I mean, I really enjoyed those couple of hours. Like at first, I was totally just, this seems like one of these overwhelming games that I'm just not gonna really get to grips with properly. But then the more I've played it, the more I've just been like, no, actually, it's not that bad. Okay. It's you can actually start to get your head around it, and there's a nice little sort of tutorial mode in it that kind of talks you through how each bit works before actually the game starts. But the tutorial mode will end, but you keep playing from that point basically. Now, there's so many different things. Like, you have resources, you need to get things like antimatter and materials and stuff so that you can build ships. There's technologies you can research that'll let you build better ships or let you do different things. And you can hire officers. You need to hire officers to command your ships, to do different things in your starbase and stuff like that. Excuse me. But the officers come in 3 different flavours as well, as do the ships. So you get like science, engineering and tactical officers, and you can only put a science officer in a science ship.
Right.
But the different ships will also have their own abilities. So science ships will do certain things, and tactical ships will just do heavy damage, and engineering ships will do like, they can drop mines and do lots of debuffs and stuff like that. So yeah, you're just kind of like trying to pair the things up. Things level up, your officers level up, they'll get more abilities. If they get more abilities, they can use them on the ships that they're on and all that kind of thing. And it's quite interesting. I've really enjoyed it.
So your fleet, the ships you're talking about, that's purely defense fleet. You don't actually explore anything.
Oh no, you do go out and explore. So basically the idea being that the Terran Federation being crippled and you might be the only person left, you're going to have to do something about that. Now at the start of the game, once the sort of tutorial mode ends, all these portals start to open up and all these mad alien things start coming through. And the idea is that you don't want to let those portals keep opening, so you have to send your fleets out to shut them down. But you might have to send them off across like a sector and stuff. It might take a few days in game time for them to get there, and then they've got to come back again. So you've got to think about, at the moment I've only got 3 ships. But like when one of these portals opens up, I'm just kind of like, well, do I send all 3 ships to deal with these aliens, or do I leave somebody behind, because you've got some pirates on the other side of you that might just come and go for your starbase. And if you don't deal with the pirates when they come for your starbase, they start whittling down your crew on your starbase, and if that ever gets to 0, game over. So they basically put the starbase under siege as such. But there's different points in the sort of galaxy that you're in that you can go to. There might be like survivors on like a mining base or something like that, and if you can go and liberate them, they might be under attack by something. They will then start creating maybe materials for your dark matter, but you have to send your ships out to pick that up and come back again and stuff. So it's all about just managing your fleet, managing your starbase, and just thinking of what you're doing. But it's not as far as I can tell so far, it's not heavy. It's not like you have really crippling decisions to make, like
micromanaging,
or do that, or good. Like you don't really get that, and like you might have with like Endless Space or something like that, when you really have to start thinking about, well, where are my choke points? Where do I have to defend? You don't really have that in this. But yeah, it's the other thing is that the graphics are all just pixelated. It's all just like that old school pixelated look. And it works for the game that it is, especially with that sort of, it's got that almost cheesy Star Trek-y type chat in it, sort of thing. So the people are like, the way that they speak, it feels like that sort of that brand of sci-fi, if you see what I mean. And it all just it does really work for the game.
Yeah.
If this had been like really gorgeous looking game sort of thing, I don't think it would have added that much to it, to be honest. It's like Endless Space, for example. If it had looked like that, it wouldn't have really made too much difference to the actual game itself.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying it. Actually was seriously considering doing more streaming tonight just to get back on it.
Is it just a single player
thing, yeah.
Open scenario?
Yeah, and there's a little story thing going through it. So all these other aliens start turning up and being like, some of them are a bit arrogant, and they don't attack you or anything. They just turn up and tell you that they're there, but then it might open up a new part of the map that shows their home sector, and you don't know what they're going to do next. Right. We've got some other guys coming up who were just basically the comedy race that were trying to buy the starbase off me.
Comedy race.
Please go away. But interestingly, they're the race that turn up and tell you that you are probably the only Terrans left now, and that basically you are the supreme leader of the Terrans now.
You Terrans. So. we will use a word that you don't even use for yourselves. Yeah. It comes from an ancient language you don't speak anymore to name you. So it gives credence to the ancient astronauts theory.
Yeah.
I
don't know that theory, but it sounds ridiculous.
It's basically that like aliens came along and developed like the Egyptians and the Aztecs, or gave them technology that they didn't have at the time, and all sorts of stuff.
Von Däniken.
I can't remember the guy.
Val Dunican.
Val Dunican. He's well into the ancient.
Däniken.
He's really into the.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, Pawel.
No, it's quite okay.
So wait, Val Dunican created Earth, right? I'm really fucking confused.
Something like that.
He's just an author. Von Däniken. He wrote a lot of stuff about that.
All right, okay. But yeah, I mean, it's a really fun game. I'm having a lot of fun with it, which is, like I say, comparing it again to Endless Space, was a game that you could keep playing forever. I wouldn't say that I had fun with it. It was just addictive.
So I know the way you play action games. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Do you play strategy games the same way?
No, never.
It does lend itself to that.
Strategy games sort of tend to be about, like, avoid chaos or you'll lose.
Yes.
Whereas action games are, if you're really good, you can create as much chaos as you want.
Yeah. So no, I don't play strategy. I take strategy games quite seriously, I think.
But with strategy games, you want to build up to a point where you can start doing silly stuff, like see what you can achieve, but it's not the same.
Well, I think with strategy games though, because I get to a point in strategy games where I just get stressed by them, and it stops being fun at that point, and I tend to just stop playing them. Things like, maybe not civilization, but like I say, endless space or...
Well, Civ 2, I always remembered I used to play like constant scenarios in that, and there was always a point I would get to, and I was like, this world I'm no longer interested in.
Yeah, well, I get to that point as well. It doesn't, like, Civ doesn't stress me out. I just get bored of the world and I want to start again.
You like it's the expansion and the growing part that's the most important, I think.
Aye, but once people start developing nuclear weapons, you get a bit, I can't be arsed with this anymore.
I think
silly.
every strategy game will have a different sort of speed stages depending on how they've been made, and even endless games will actually differ quite a lot. And depending on which faction in endless games you play, you'll have different sense of, I suppose, interest. Whether it's just the beginning of the game, or the middle period, or the end game.
Yeah.
And then Total War, if you guys have played any of
Yeah,
those.
but see, Total War's another one where I would just get to a point in it and I would just go, I'm just fed up with these constant skirmishes on my borders that are going nowhere. Nobody can do anything. It just becomes a Cold War after a while.
Total War's, for some reason, Total War Shogun definitely, and the newest Total War as well, to a lesser degree, has got this sort of threshold to, and I actually struggle to go through it as well, because you build, you develop, everything progresses, but you know that at some point in Shogun 2 everybody would turn against you, all your allies, everybody just assumes, oh, you're trying to be Shogun, let's destroy you. And the same thing in Total War Warhammer now. In the main campaign, if you play, again, you expand your empire, you I don't know, improve your cities, build your armies, but you know that at some point chaos is gonna wake up and flood the land, and then everything changes. So there is a bit of a stress element to that. But I suppose in a normal Civilization game, there is no actual sort of triggers that change the game as such. It's just going to be the size of it, and I suppose boredom or something like this.
Yeah, you get to a point where there's nothing new coming at you anymore. And once I think like that, usually for Civilization, it was always basically the world had been entirely explored. You knew where everything was, and it was just this kind of just almost like a Cold War, sort of gradually kind of, and generally it would go nowhere at that point as well. The game just kind of hit a brick wall, which was fine because you knew at that point it was like, right, ding it and either start a new game or go and play something else.
Aye.
Have you guys ever had an absolutely open, all-out war in a Civilization game?
Yeah.
Because this is one of the
and I mainly start them because I'm bored.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I think could actually make it interesting in the later stages.
Yeah.
When your entire world, whereas it's Civilization or endless games, if everything is discovered, then it's like when we play board games, we start just interested in our own stuff, but at some point we start fighting each other because there is nothing else to do.
No, I mean, usually when I get to that stage in a game, I'm usually locked in a serious war with at least one of the factions involved. That's just the way it goes.
But see, I think these things work quite well in board games because board games need to have a definite end.
Yeah.
And modern board games anyway, because we're not talking diplomacy here, because that could just go on forever. But we're talking about so even like the Sid Meier's Civilization board game, which we still haven't talked about. There's a definite end to that, so you could end up in open warfare with people, but you get to a point where somebody will hit that victory condition or something like that, and it's limited by the rules, sort of thing. Yeah, and you just you don't really get that with some of these computer strategy games. It's just a case of I'm done with this now. Yeah. Like you just draw the line at some point and just say nah, that's it.
There's a point that just the joy is sucked in.
The point I'm trying to make there, was that in Halcyon 6. The game, it doesn't feel like that's going to happen with this because there's a little sort of story bit going through it, like little sort of story beats, and one of the other nice things about it is that you actually get missions to do. So if pirates turn up at one of these places that you could possibly go and get materials from them if you liberate them, you'll get a little mission in the bottom of the screen saying you need to go and help these people. So you've got little things that you can aim for. You don't have to sort of sit there and just go, well, what am I doing now? Oh. I'm quite happy just sitting here doing nothing. So, and Halcyon 6, so it does give you stuff to do as you're playing through it. We'll see how far it goes with that. Right. Like I say, I've only played it was maybe about 2 hours. So we'll see how far that goes. But at the moment, it's looking quite promising.
Okay.
And like I say, it doesn't take itself too seriously. Knows it's a strategy game, but doesn't just bore you to death with it, basically. Smack you over the head with the strategy hammer.
Like super dry, lots of numbers kind of thing. That's good.
And what's cool is, like, in the combats and stuff, the ships do some nice little animations like you would expect from some sort of JRPG thing. Like, one of my ships I got totally exploits weapon systems going down, but I can hit all the ships. So if you manage to get all the ships' weapon systems down, it'll hit all the ships by flying out and then spinning ridiculously up and down the screen, just shooting wildly, and then it'll come back. Like, and it's quite nice.
Break.
Yeah, it is quite nice what they've done with that combat system. I really think I don't think that's ever been done before in a strategy game. So
using that style, but not in a traditional way of using it, I suppose.
And it's got that proper, at the bottom of the screen, it shows you who's going next. That little
little
barrel thing, so you can plan your attacks and stuff like that. Yeah. Those are good. So yeah, that's Massive Damage Inc. that do that game. Halcyon 6 Starbase Commando. Good game.
Sounds good indeed.
Cool.
Right, so let's wrap up, Pavel. You're going to tell us about Endless Space 2.
Endless Space 2 is currently in early release as of about a week ago. Possibly slightly more than that. And it's going to be an early release for the next, 3-4 months before they fully release it. Endless Space 2 is part of a larger franchise. And it's actually a fairly, I'm going to say, weird franchise, because they have other strategy games, but there's also something called Endless Dungeon. I've not actually tried it, but I think it's...
I've got that.
It's something else completely.
Yeah, I played it once, and that's a weird thing.
Yeah.
If it's what I'm thinking about, it's a totally pixelated.
Yeah, it's an old one. Yeah.
And it's more like a roguelike.
I think it's supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah, I played it once. I wasn't overly impressed by it, to be honest.
Well, it's long time ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I mentioned it is because between most of these games, there is a strange crossover sort of thing, at least lore-wise. So, if you played Endless Space 1 and Endless Legend, you would actually see most of the factions were different, but there was an actual faction that was in both these games. Like, you have this spacefaring nation that crashed on a planet, and 1,000 years later they have the mythology that they came from the stars, but now they have to they're still very science minded.
Oh, but they don't start with guns.
No, the crossbows, but they very
really, because I was convinced that there was like a spacefaring nation in Endless Legend that actually had just crash landed on the planet and had guns and stuff.
I think there's a skin for them that does it.
Oh, right, okay.
But in any case, so here's the crossover that I meant, yeah? So Endless Space 1 was first. I've actually tried to play it, never really went further than a couple of rounds. I can't remember. I've played Endless Legend a bit, but never completed it. Endless Space 2, and it's a very dumbed down game version just now because it's early release, so it's essentially half a game in regards to content. And I've already played the entire game and completed it. So I think I can generally say straight away that I really enjoyed it, because it doesn't happen often that I sit down and complete a fairly large, immersive strategy game, straight away. So for those of you guys who don't know what it is, really, this is going to be your strategy game as such. You've got your world, in this particular case, a galaxy. You've got systems you can populate and manage and expand, just like, I suppose, in Civilization you would do with continents and whatever cities. But Endless Space does things in its own sort of unique way. I've not seen things done the same way as I suppose recently it's become popular. There's been a few clones trying to do what Amplitude Studios have done with the Endless strategy games. But from Endless Space 2, you can see that they're becoming more and more, I suppose, confident in the way they do it, and they're polishing it up fairly well. And if we spoke a second ago about Tomb Raiders all being sort of the same, I think I can quite honestly say that in Endless Space 2 you see a lot of improvement over Endless Space 1 in pretty much every manner. And it's not just graphics, although graphics in Endless Space 2 are amazing compared to previous games, because you don't in a game like this you don't need animations, and you've got them, but Endless Space 1 probably didn't have it. Endless Legend started having it, which is quests as such. Endless Space 2 has quite a lot of them, and it's still just early release, and the full release of the game will have enough of an RPG element to provide you with narration pretty much through the whole game. There's no campaign in Endless games. Instead, you just set every single time you play, you set up all your conditions for the game.
Yeah.
Which is an important thing, because you can, depending on the choices you make, your gameplay will be very different every single time, because these factions are actually quite different from each other. Again, Endless Space 1, quite unique. Some of the factions in Endless Space 1 were quite unique. And then in Endless Legend, I suppose it was continued. We only have 4 major factions to choose from in Endless Space 2. At the moment, there's going to be 8 in total with the full release. And some of these factions, well, one of the factions is very generic, because it's just space monsters wanting to kill everybody. But then you get your... And I suppose you could think about Sophons as a very generic faction, because it's just a peaceful... very science-minded race, and Sophons.
I remember them.
Sophons are sort of like a poster child of Endless Space. So.
Yeah, can you not?
You would think about it as a default faction to play with. If you can't choose anybody, then Sophons would be your people to go for.
Can you still just like make your own faction essentially in this?
You're gonna obviously have aesthetics of a faction, but apart from that, in the full release, yes, you can.
But the actual traits that they have, you can change all of those.
Yes,
because I remember you could do that.
Obviously,
in Endless
makes
Space.
For an even more complex.
I used to do that all the time.
Decision making in Endless Space. Decisions you make before you actually start your own, custom campaign, define your game. You can't make custom race just yet. It's going to be part of full release.
Right.
But then you get Vodiani, which is, I may have mentioned it on Twitter, which is a cult, a religious organization that pretty much, instead of exploiting food sources, exploit populations. So they pretty much just come to your orbit and start sucking life out of you, which to me is a very, symbolic, because that's pretty much what religions do. But you get...
Again there.
And everybody just keeps saying that this is pretty much what Broken Lords were in Endless Legend. And then you get Lumeris in Endless Space 2, which is a race of traders, pretty much. Right. Traders. And there's clear similarities between this faction and the roving clans from Endless Legend. So there's a lot of stuff that Amplitude Studio took from both Endless Space 1 and Endless Legend and just sort of merged them both together in this game. Well, it just works.
But I don't know, but I kind of expect that from them.
Yeah.
Especially after that crossover from Endless Space and Endless Legend.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact that pretty much all the resources and stuff in both games are identical.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like this is what they're going for. They're going for this almost lore that these are the same.
That's the thing that they try. Is there a deliberate thing to create a universe which they can have lots of games in, or is it just kind of loose?
It definitely felt like
what they do, yes.
Endless Legend felt like you were playing on a planet in the Endless Space.
Yeah.
So
it's supposed to feel this way. Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's a design choice, and it sort of works. But more about the game and possibly improvements between Endless Space 2 and 1.
So I take it they've still got dust.
There's dust. There's dust in all of these games, which
currency.
is your currency unit, yes. Although obviously
because they couldn't use spice.
Yeah, basically.
There is lore behind dust, yes. It is sort of spice, from Dune. A lot of things are exactly as you expect them, so you pretty much have worker placement, but which is something I expect you guys loving your Euro games. This is not just a nameless meeple in this game. a meeple with identity this time. Every single meeple in Endless Space 2 has actually got pretty much a race identity.
Right.
So your populations are never just nameless people.
Faceless
If you're a galactic civilization, you end up not just being humans. If you play humans, there's no human faction just yet. So say you're starting as Sophons, and at some point you start conquering minor civilizations.
Okay.
You've got a mix of civilizations. Each of these meeples has slightly different factors, whatever they bring to your production
Also,
on the planets and
every
stuff like this.
individual will have its own traits to some extent.
To some extent, yes. But
That's quite interesting.
But we'll get to the most interesting part, which I never expected in a moment. But yeah, so I'm just gonna say, even if you're playing the Vodiani, which is pretty much the cult based on blood purity, and all the other races are pretty much just food souls, even they, at some point, I'm gonna say, suffer from diversity. But you can clearly see that they're baddies.
Brexit.
You sound like some angry Middle Englander.
No, I was just going to say that what's
diversity ever done for us?
Multiculturalism
has failed.
What's actually absolutely brilliant, in my opinion, about Endless Space 2 is that you see this awareness that people are actually not just these homogeneous, never-ending, xenophobic one race, and everybody else is different from us and is somebody else. And instead, you've got different, I suppose, factions. But within those factions, there's a lot of different actual, I suppose, ethnicities.
Interesting to see how that works.
And it works interestingly. When I played, because I wanted to learn the game, and because this is early release, I should mention there is no actual advanced tutorial. And Endless Space games can be quite confusing, complex if you've never played Endless Space 1 or Legend before. I should also say, if you play it on Steam, do something that I've only realized is there when I was about to finish the game at about 100 round, I think it was. There was a patch now that allows you to play endlessly, which is in the title of the game. But just before the patch, your game was limited to 126 rounds. Again, just because it's early release.
Yeah.
So even your options to modify galaxy, you can't go for, I don't know, extra huge galaxy. You only will have medium size and things like this. So with full release, there's going to be much more stuff. But I just wanted to say, if you struggle, there is an actual full manual for the game. It's just in PDF format, but it explains everything about the game. And you can, if you just bloody right-click on the title of the game in your Steam library, right underneath Play Game, there is a manual. I only noticed it like yesterday.
You don't read manuals for computers.
No,
Nobody reads manuals for video games.
I never needed it. I was struggling because I couldn't figure out how trade routes work, and obviously because this is it only came out like a week ago. If you start googling for it, you get a lot of advice for previous Endless Space game, but not for second.
Okay.
And I suddenly realized it's all written down there. So use it if you need it, yeah?
Because the resources aren't online yet.
Yes.
To be fair, I mean, Endless Space and Endless Legend are, when you walk into those games, it's overwhelming.
Right.
It is quite.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah. And there's going to be plenty of players that will just bounce away because they either don't understand it or they don't grasp the sense of dynamics in this game. And the first few rounds, there's really not that much going on. If you know what you're preparing for, then you have a plan and you go about doing this plan. But if you're just starting fresh and you've no idea what's happening, then you might just don't get discouraged, because these games can be amazing, especially for people that like their 4X format. Because it started, I suppose, fairly shy, but I think with Endless Space 2 coming out, it's just joining the big guns on the 4X scene. So. Coming back to improvements, because the big section of, I suppose, discussions online is the actual combat. Every Endless Space does it. Endless Legend did it differently. Endless Space 1 had combat, which was sort of,
I don't think, a card game, wasn't it?
Very warmly received. And Endless Space 2 at the moment is what it is, which is, obviously, the more units you bring into combat, the better chances you win. Yeah. And every single ship can be modified and upgraded. I should say every single blueprint can be modified, and then you obviously build your ships and stuff like this. You can retrofit them later, and this is what truly matters in preparing for combat rather than combat itself. I think the Amplitude themselves said that they're not trying to make you a tactical commander, but rather an emperor. So you're governing over your entire whatever faction. So they're not giving you full control over how exactly the battle is fought. So what I'm aiming at, when you actually have, say, 2 ships on an orbit of whatever enemy faction, and the enemy faction will have 2 ships there, your combat triggers. In combat itself, the only thing you can influence is a tactical choice of how your ships are going to fly through whatever bit of space where the space combat is taking place. So you can either have them, I don't know, go straight into the enemy fleet, or take a more sort of reserved approach, because that will, I don't know, keep them slightly more at range. Yes. So you make your choices before the battle section, depending on what sort of armament you have and what sort of, I suppose, cannons and other missiles your opponent would have, and that's really all the influence you have over the battle. Now, because there's literally nothing else you can do in battle, it's quite surprising that what happens next is an actual full rendering of a space battle, and you can watch every single torpedo being shot and fly onto the other ship, damage being taken, and whatsoever. You can watch it.
Has that improved from Endless Space? Because Endless Space was similar.
Yes.
Except that in Endless Space, or what I remember, there was a long range, a mid range, and a short range section to each fight, and you had to pick a sort of card thing at the start, depending on how what you'd researched and stuff, I think. Mm-hmm. So you could research different things that would give you different strategies in combat.
Now, I'll be honest, I don't know that much about combat just because I played the Lumeris, which are trade people, and I wasn't fighting that much. I was fighting mostly, minor factions. Because I wanted to learn how the game plays, what I've done is I went for just one enemy in the whole galaxy. I made the one enemy Sophons, who are peace-loving as well, so I knew I wouldn't be fighting a lot. I wanted to just learn how, and to be fair, that just meant it was so easy to win the game, which is important. If you want your game to be at least a challenge, just make sure your actual starting conditions are challenging. And I went for whatever default galaxy, but let's just go for one enemy, because I don't want to be too overwhelmed during my first play. Who shall we make them? Let's make it Sophons. As soon as I discovered the first and only major other civilization in the galaxy, I made peace with them, and pretty much it stayed like this until the end of the game. There's six winning conditions in Endless Space 2, but in an early release there's only 2 unlocked. One of them is military win, and the other one is just points, as in who scores the most. So there's no cards as such in Endless Space 2. You just choose your strategies at the beginning of the fight section. If you research combat strategies, I'm assuming you're gonna have more strategies, and there's gonna be additional strategies released with the full release. And I suppose it also depends on what ships you have, because various ships will have better sync with the strategy you're choosing or worse. But apart from this, all you do once the actual battle starts is you just watch it. Cool. And they explained that they've included the actual option to watch it, so that you can actually see what your choices. You're not just seeing the final result of the battle, how many hit points which ship lost, but rather what was happening during the battle. Fair enough. I've played through the whole 126 rounds, and I enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to more, because I've now started playing the Dastardly Buddy Church people, who are all about pretty much just not fighting to kill. No, the best thing is just to keep them under the heel and suck their life energy out of them. But yeah, still plenty of fighting because you have to.
Right. So the actual, other than the battle stuff and that, is there still all the micromanagement of planets and all that sort of thing
And
going on?
even more so than before.
So.
Oh man.
Right. Okay. No, see, I'm tempted to just give this a miss then, because that drove me mental. Like, seriously drove me mental in Endless Space, going through because you could set it to auto-govern, but then you would go to the planet and go, why the hell have you built this? Like,
that's like anything when you auto-build. Don't auto-build in any game.
Well, at some point,
no matter how stressed out you are.
I'm just going to say, if you build every single thing just because you can, then at some point you'll start, your planets are not just your production ability, obviously. And because I was playing the trade people, I was able to fairly early expand a lot. By the time I realized I'm making a huge mistake, I had a lot of money, lots of systems, and suddenly my whatever happiness in the systems went really, like an avalanche down. Soon enough, I had rebellion in all the systems, and I was just about to.
That happened to me in Endless Space. I remember.
You have to be careful with things like this.
Yeah, I played a game, and it was the longest game I'd played, and I think I ended up with something like, it was a ridiculous amount of planets. I dedicated myself to it though. Like I just sat and played nothing but that for a whole week or something.
Yeah.
I ended up with something like, I don't know, 70 planets or something that I was trying to micromanage constantly.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the happiness just started dropping, like just plummeting. And then it was like, I don't know what to do.
So Endless Space 2 is about micromanaging.
Yeah, right. I'm not getting it then.
and this is just.
Games, like I said, when we were talking about Civ 2 earlier.
This is the beauty of it, and no other game does it as well. But also, if you don't have patience for it, and it's probably not the game for you, because this is the reason to pick this game up. Micromanagement.
It's more just that, like, I sit there thinking when I'm playing these games that I could be making Lara Croft dive into concrete, and that's much more fun.
Well, again, yes, obviously, if you have a choice between action games and strategy games, then
this might be why I do this in games. Actually, maybe I just played way too many strategy games in my younger days.
You need to buck up.
But now I just have to let it all out.
Imagine that nowadays in Endless Space 2, it's not just about having a lot of population, but because if you overpopulate your planet, that causes problems. But also, every single building you build causes different political factions to rise or lose in your civilization. Politics is actually, to me, the biggest surprise and one of the most entertaining factors of Endless Space 2. You've got politics.
Yeah, but I can see why that's fun. But I mean, once you get to the point, like I say, once you start getting sort of like over 50 planets or something, that I can just see
every
that becoming
system will have its political representatives, depending on which political sentiments in the system are represented the most, depending on what you've built and which meeples you have, because every meeple will have different sympathies. So every system has its representatives. Every 20 rounds you have elections, and depending on which political scene you have in your Senate, you'll have a very different composition of laws you can have in your empire. So if you're Lumeris, you start as pacifists because you want to make money, and one of your resources, because you're not just making dust in this game anymore. You're also making power, political sort of power, and the more you have, the better laws you can introduce. Also, any other political faction requires power. Even actions with other empires will require this resource as well. So if you want to strike peace with someone or even offer trade, it costs power as well. So you need that resource, obviously. Right. But at some point, if you're really devoted to pacifism, which is what I was when I was playing Lumeris, and I was able to, because no one was really attacking me, I was able to introduce a law which, like peacetime prosperity or whatever it was called, that pretty much doubled my dust intake, which was important for Lumeris because these guys spread by pretty much just buying off planets. So I bought off half the galaxy and started expanding all those colonies, building shitload of them, and because I was building so much in them, my industrial political faction gained a lot of power.
Right.
And because they gained a lot of power, the composition of my Senate changed. I lost access to the powerful peacetime prosperity law. And suddenly I was just about to bankrupt. So things that... There is so much stuff that happens in
Trump
this game.
took over the Senate.
And just as I was about to lose this game, I realised how awesome politics are in this game.
Right. That actually sounds like quite
There's
interesting.
a lot of different political options, and you can research more advanced, which I never actually got to, because you start as at least if you play as Luminaries, you start as a republic, but at some point you can actually change your government to democracy, obviously, other things as well, and they again drastically change how your empire is managed. Brilliant stuff. I hate politics. Honestly,
just a quick one in terms of, because it sounds really complex what this game's capable of doing. Like things like, could you actually have maybe part of your, say you'd expanded to about 50 planets or something, you're saying, could you actually have like a planet break away or something like that out of you? Like, could your empire politically fall apart that much that you would lose a faction or something like that?
I believe so. I can't confirm it yet because I was able to contain the rebellions in my systems, because at some point it was really getting rather scary. But my rebellions mostly just kicked me in the back financially.
Yeah.
Because I was playing the trade faction without actually knowing how trade routes work, which was strange.
Well, that's a fundamental mistake, I think.
Well, I was making a lot of money on other stuff.
Right.
And trade routes is just one additional factor.
Miscellaneous things.
I was making a lot of money in lean hogs.
Right, we're
I was
going
selling
to have
short
to wrap up.
grapes.
Just to answer this question.
Yeah.
I believe that at some point a system in rebellion will spawn a neutral
Yeah, you think
fleet,
something like that would be right.
and possibly even system will break off. I've not seen it happen, but I think I saw it described online.
Right, cool.
Okay.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up on that?
I don't think I've played a strategy game of this particular type that I wanted to jump into straight away, and I'm playing another round right now. It's brilliant, and it's just early release at the moment. And I should mention quests as you go through give it a lot of narrative. There is a lot of lore in this game. The world is very well built. All these races actually have a lot of identity now. Endless Space 1 was just a couple of lines of text. Right now it's a lot, and it's brilliant.
Right, well that's Endless Space 2 by Amplitude Studios.
That it is.
And it's early release at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know when the full version is
in
being
about
released?
3 months.
About 3 months, so it's not too
they
far
say
away.
that normally they keep their games in early release between 3 and 4 months.
Right, cool. Right, well that's been episode 29.
Bloody hell.
Aye. That's
So that's me now back
that difficult
to
29th episode.
Lara. I'm heading back home to play some.
You're heading home to Lara, are you?
Yeah.
Oh well. I'm heading back to my starbase. What about you, Euan?
I don't know. I was going to actually consider firing up Factorio again. There's been a part of my brain that has been itching for Factorio recently, but Steam's been being a bit of a dickhead the last weekend or so. So hopefully I can get it running. But yeah, we'll see.
Okay, well, we'll end the show there, so we'll do some internets, will we?
Let's.
Yes, let's do some internets, right?
We'll let you do it because you're better at it.
If you want to email us, you can email us at firstplayertoken@gmail.com. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, but that's at 1stplayertoken, not the word first, unlike all our other stuff. 1stplayertoken. We're on SoundCloud, you can find us on iTunes, and if you do, please rate us. We've got at least one rating at the moment.
Nice to see.
At least one.
We also got a comment on one of our YouTube videos as well.
Yes, we got a comment on one of our first ever comment, and it was just to point out that Pawel was cheating at Scythe. So I was quite happy with that comment.
That's good.
To my defence, I'm Polish.
That's not a defence.
What? No. This is a cultural
sure that
trait.
qualifies as an explanation.
So yeah, we are on YouTube. You can find us there. My Twitch username is Unnecessary Chris if you want to watch me streaming some more Halcyon 6 and
once a month.
Similar games like that. Yeah, at the moment it's happening once a month. I'm going to try and increase that. Hopefully we move into new headquarters and I've actually got an upload speed that I can deal with.
Chris is rubbing his hands together at the thought of that high-speed broadband.
High speed, because living here, Jesus, the slowest street in the world. Our website is firstplayertoken.com. Now, we had a bit of an issue with the website in which we lost everything, so I've put a placeholder page up which does have links to our Facebook and our Twitter and stuff on it. We will work on getting some actual content on the website soon.
It's what we call a landing page these days.
Yes, we've got a landing page. And we are part of the Podnose network, which is a network of podcasts.
As you might assume.
The UK's leading entertainment network, I believe.
Yes.
Sweet.
So that's www.podnose.com. So go there and have a look and you'll find lots of podcasts on lots of different subjects. And that's us. So we will be back hopefully in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a move to do in between that, so hopefully we will get back. We'll both have played some games. I know this weekend we have a big one on.
Oh yes, we've got a big one.
We've got a big one this weekend.
And this will definitely warrant some dissection.
Yes, even if that episode of that podcast is only about this game.
It may well be.
It may well be. And it would warrant it as well.
Yeah.
So,
not to preempt anything, but I think this may even warrant a little bit of in-game recording, video and audio.
We could do that. I don't know if...
Well, not the whole thing. That would be
I was going to say, considering how long this game is going to take, I don't know if I've got the space for that on my laptop.
Yeah.
But yes, we are going to play Twilight Imperium 3 this weekend.
Finally.
With the first expansion, just to add another couple of hours on it. This will be epic. Yep. And we have set aside an entire day and we have a team of people, so this should be good. So yeah, we'll see you in episode 30, presumably from a different place from where we are now, but it'll be the same old podcast.
That'll not matter.
Yeah.
This is like when podcasts hosts tell people
Well, you
about their
never know,
moving
it might
studio
be
and they're like,
slightly different
"You get some
sound."
tops."
Yeah, it may be a slightly different sound.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully
like
less
acoustics,
police sirens.
Yeah.
So listen out for that.
Yeah, and we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.